Hello everyone, CrystalFissure here with Nintendogen64, and us two are here to discuss Spyro in Japan, but more specifically, why Spyro the Dragon, why the whole series as a whole failed in Japan. Now, Japan and I went to Japan, but no, Angus and I went to Japan back at the end of 2016, start of 2017, and what did we do, Angus? What did we do while we were in Japan, specifically at the end of the trip?
Well, towards the end of the trip, we'd done all the sightseeing we needed to do. We had a few days spare up our sleeves, so we basically hit every single retro secondhand game, video game store to buy up as many PlayStation 1 games as we possibly could. We were just going, or PS2 games, we were just going on a video game hunting spree, because if any of you have been to Japan, you will know that there are like a million stores there that sell retro video games. For a good price too. It's very cheap to buy them over there. So you and I went through, all the book offs we could find, all the super potatoes we could find, hunting down video games. And to our surprise, Spyro the Dragon was one of the most elusive titles they had. They had plenty of Crash Bandicoot games out there. Pepsi Man. I even found Pepsi Man without too much trouble. But Spyro the Dragon, what a difficult series to find.
Yeah, it was just like we legitimately went to 10 plus places. Now this was in Osaka, so maybe if we went to Tokyo it would be a bit different, but I don't think so, because I think that it probably would have been even rarer in a bigger city, because it's like it is so known, Akihabara. No. We went to Akihabara as well. Yeah,
we went there as well. Yeah, we couldn't find it in Akihabara, like the capital, like the retro pop culture capital of the world, or at least Japan, Akihabara.
Like Otakuville, basically.
Yeah, in Tokyo, and they didn't have. I mean, we asked in all the stores, like the Mandarakes, which is like a big pop culture sort of chain in Japan, and they didn't have Spyro game. They always said sold out, but I think our impression was that they didn't have it to begin with.
I think yeah, like if you go on eBay or Amazon, stuff like that, you'll see that there are plenty of copies online. So obviously people hoard them to make money, because they know that they are so rare. And I guess what we sort of want to talk about is there really is a reason why Spyro failed, and it's not just like, oh, Japan didn't take to it, like, it wasn't as good as Crash and stuff like that, because I do maintain that I do think that Spyro was the better series of the two in terms of gameplay, at least in the first three versus 3. Whereas in Japan, after Spyro 2, that was it. They never got Spyro 3. They never got a Hero's Tale or Enter the Dragonfly. They got a couple GBA games. They didn't get The Legend of Spyro. And they only ever got Skylanders, Spyro's Adventure, in, I believe, 2013, 2 years after the release of the first one in the States and Australia and all that. So already, when people love to brag about Crash Bandicoot's, figures in terms of sales, Spyro will forever be behind because of the fact that there were only 2 main releases ever released in Japan in the 2000s.
That's right.
It's behind. It can never ever catch up to Spyro, because Japan is a huge market, like, for games. You know what I mean? Like, Crash was a huge hit in Japan, and if you look at their metrics, if you look at how many copies they have sold, it's very much boosted by the Japanese market. Do you know what I mean?
So what the hell did Spyro do wrong to, sour the tastes, of all these Japanese video game players? Because let's face it, in Japan, this is how much they love their video games, folks. You can still buy an in-the-box Dreamcast in Japan.
Yeah.
You can find those without too much difficulty. But Spyro is just what did it do? Because to most of our listeners, you will probably know that it's one of, if not like the flagship series of the PlayStation 1, right? Yeah. I think that's pretty fair to say.
Very much.
What happened? So let's talk about the Japanese release of Spyro 1. I think that's the best place to start.
Yeah. So first and foremost, I mean, if you look at, we both own. You own Spyro 2, right? You have Spyro 2 Japanese, right?
I own Spyro 2 Japanese, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So I got Spyro 1 Japanese as well. So Angus did actually find a copy, right? It was like the only copy we ever saw, right? There was nothing else. So anyway, if you look at the Spyro 1 like manual and all that sort of stuff, you can see that the effort is there. Like there's the typical, like with Crash, there's like all this additional context. There's like these cool pictures, animations, like not, you know, like a cartoon sort of style stuff. You've got all this detail. You can see that like from a, you know, merit standpoint, like all of the stuff that usually goes into like creating like a Japanese game, it's all there. And then you fucking load up the game, you start the disc, and instantly you are greeted with this just horrific camera angle. Now, like the funny thing is that if you're listening to this as like a casual listener, or like you don't really know much about, you know, Spyro or just even video games, that you think like, what the fuck does it matter what the camera looks like? What does it matter the perspective that you're playing the game from? And let me tell you, it means everything. And I really do mean pretty much everything, doesn't it? It completely transforms the way the game's played, right?
Oh, for sure. It's for those of you who saw CrystalFissure's latest video, or one of his most recent ones, of that Crawdad Farm Spyro camera angle video. Imagine if you basically had a similar thing to that, like the top-down sort of view for the entire game, and there was no way you could change it.
Yeah.
That's sort of what we're dealing with Spyro 1 Japanese. It's like, I believe the reason for this, and you can quote me if I'm wrong on this, CrystalFissure, but Super Mario 64, just a couple of years earlier, did big numbers in Japan. And that game had a sort of, not quite directly behind camera view, but it was more of like a floating sort of slightly above the, you know, the subject, so slightly above Mario. And so they tried to emulate that, but the problem is that Spyro is a quadruped, whereas Mario is a biped. So Mario stands upright on two legs, and Spyro is sort of lower to the ground. And when you get that kind of perspective with Spyro, it makes it a lot trickier to maneuver around, because you're looking at him from like a downward point, and the game is a fast-paced game. Like, you're charging around most of the time, and you can't kind of see stuff from either side of you, and to react and sort of go for that kind of stuff. Say if there's an enemy to your left or whatever, instead of rotating the camera and seeing it, you can only see this now if it comes directly in your peripheral vision, which makes the game not difficult, but frustrating.
Yeah, just tedious. That's the way I'd describe it. Just really tedious, really just really sort of just weird. Like it doesn't really it doesn't flow well. And then that's not the only thing. Is that by itself, okay, that's annoying. But what the real problem is with it is that it comes also coupled with the fact that Spyro now controls way slower. He actually plays way slower. So for example, his charge is basically as fast as the walk. Maybe like the walk is like, you know, 0.9% of it, or like 0.990 or something like that. So like maybe the walk is slightly faster, but I'm playing this right now. Like I'm charging in Spyro 2 and it's the same as Spyro 1. And holy crap, is it slow. Like it feels like I am not getting anywhere, you know. And walking is just, it's like, it's similar to the walking in Spyro, but the charging is just absolutely horrendous. So you've got this bad camera angle, and then you've got this bad charging, and everything, it feels like a different game. Like it feels like this poorly made, I don't know, like game where Spyro sort of lauded for being like really smooth gameplay, having really smooth gameplay. This feels like the exact opposite, right? It feels like they took a game that was controlled really, really well, and then decided, hey, let's fuck this up, let's muck it up and make it actually really annoying to play, and let's make it so you can't see shit half the time, you know. Like
it reeks of corporate manipulation as well. Like it's obvious that these changes were made in line with, I suppose, Japanese video gamers' expectations of what a 3D platformer should be like. Let's face it, if you and I grew up playing Spyro the way that the Japanese version is intended to be played, then we wouldn't laud it as one of these amazing video games, you know?
Yeah, you can still definitely praise the you can definitely praise the what's the word, like not controls, like the environments and the music and the graphics. but the way it plays, it would be more connected to like something like a Croc or a Gex or something like that. Like where it's like where those games are considered pretty good, like they got some cool environments and cool music, but the way it controls like always felt kind of problematic. You know what I mean? Like you know what I mean, right? With Gex and Croc, like kind of like secondary platformer series kind of thing. Let's
talk about the
would be.
signs everywhere as well. Like that's another thing about this game. There's like signposts everywhere.
Yeah.
And
especially in one, way more in one. I believe I've
had these. We've had these translated, and they're like by a Japanese person that we both know mutually, and they're really not that helpful. They tell you basic things, but the problem is if you charge into one of these signposts, it automatically reads the text, right? Or you have to press X to it.
This in Spyro
like
2, it's triangle,
Triangle, triangle. That's right. So it's like this weird, pointless addition that doesn't add anything to the gameplay. It just sort of, it's like in Crash Bandicoot.
It's them trying to explain everything. Yeah, it's a bit like that. Were you going to say like the Aku Aku thing?
The Aku Aku mask in the Japanese Crash one just shows up all.
This is them like trying to explain away like elements that you should just explore yourself. It's like it makes you wonder like maybe was Japan as like a gaming country that's not ready for like the open worldishness of Spyro 1. Because if you think about Spyro 1, that game's like way different to Spyro 2 and 3, like in terms of like just the exploration basis and the fact that there's like there's barely any NPCs. Like you've got the dragons, obviously, 80 of them, but it's not. I don't know. Like it doesn't feel the exact same thing.
Well, that's my love for Spyro 1 is that it feels empty and you feel like you're legitimately going around and exploring for yourself.
It's as if the what are they called? Like it's as if the execs, like the corporate executives, were like, they're not going to understand that you're meant to just look around for the gems and like let's just explain that you need to do everything. You know what I mean? Let's just explain where everything is, because I'm sure there's some. And look, there's some like humor in some of them as well. Like there's like one hidden behind a portal, and I think it says something like, "Hey, what are you doing here?" or something like that. So that's cool. But overall, it's an unneeded element. I mean, yeah, on the scale of like bad controls and signs, obviously signs are way less of an issue. But the real story, I believe, and this is sort of became common knowledge at this point, but apparently the real story behind the reason why they have the slower game and stuff like that was because apparently the fast-paced nature caused Japanese kids to like get very dizzy and stuff like that, like and they'd be very like apparently it was just a problem, like it was a health problem out of anything.
A seizure, like they had seizures or something, is that right?
I'm trying to think, was it, I don't know if it was severe as seizures, but I know that it was definitely like considered an issue, you know, like we're in the testing phase. And that just makes me think like, what happens if this whole thing came down to this one child who just so happened to be probably seizure or like headaches could be induced by anything, and then he just so happened to be in that room that day, and then like these really overly reactionary executives were like, oh shit, like oh my god, we better change the entire engine, because seriously it is an engine change. They have to change the engine. You have to make him slower, you have to do this and that, you have to change the way the camera works. That would have taken time from Insomniac. And mind you, this game did not come out at the same time as the US, so it actually was delayed. I believe it actually came out in 1999.
That's right, 99. Yep. So the same year Spyro 2 came out.
It required extra work.
And also Spyro 2, it also featured, it was delayed by a year as well. Spyro 2 came out in 2000 in Japan.
Yeah, so North America September 10, 98, EU October 23, and then Spyro the Dragon Japanese release. Let's have a look. Release date. I think it was sometime in 1999, but it must have been. I'm guessing like, I don't know. Probably maybe not a full year, but at least April 1999. So quite over half a year. Put it that way. Over half a year. That's bad. I mean that's it. Like so. That actually brings you to another minor point, is that The fact that Spyro came late in the PlayStation 1 cycle was actually kind of a problem for, I think, Spyro in general. I wouldn't actually say that's exclusively a Japanese issue. Don't you reckon? Like regarding Spyro 3, like Spyro 3, if you look at it, if Spyro 2 came out in 2000 in Japan, that would have meant that Spyro 3 would have came out in 2001
if it did
in
come
Japan.
out, that's right. Yeah.
And Japan was like going apeshit for the PlayStation 2. So
That's
it would have
right.
been like completely lost in the shuffle anyway. So
Well, I mean, let's talk about this now. Like, in Japan, their preference for consoles was different to ours. Like, they had everything over there was quite competitive in like the late 2000s. Even the Dreamcast, I believe.
Yeah, the Dreamcast
did its best numbers over in Japan.
Yeah.
Which I guess means like the PlayStation 1 really was like on its way out in like the time when Spyro came around, because the PlayStation 2 was just around the corner. And I mean, even like it's only a matter of like a year, 2 years, right? That overlap period. But like Crash Bandicoot,
yeah.
I think the reason Crash Bandicoot has just become like, it is the number one game on the PlayStation is because it did have that little extra time to germinate in the minds of fans, because it came out like a year or a few months into the release of the PlayStation 1.
Yeah, that's
96?
right. Yeah, well,
right?
I think PlayStation was 94, but it's still very early on. 96 is still quite early on. Like overall, yeah, it's still quite an early game. And yeah, you had the third game by 98, so Spyro wasn't even out yet in Japan when Crash was releasing its third game. So that's definitely under, so Crash had the head start for sure. Like that's another thing, in terms of Spyro versus Crash. So it had a head start, but yeah, it just seems like, I mean, and then not just the fact that, okay, so you look at it from like this marketing perspective, right? 1 and 2 didn't do all too well. But then instead of even giving it another try, like on the next console, they just stopped doing it entirely. Like no, like console Spyro game again. That's it. You got two of them.
Yeah.
They got two.
I mean, until you get to Skylanders.
Skylanders, which isn't
2013,
even,
mind you.
Which
2013.
and I wouldn't even call it a Spyro game. Like
no, well, I mean that's right. Spyro was so buried in that game anyway. But,
and then okay. So obviously the GBA was a popular console, sure. So you've got your Spyro. I think it was Spyro Adventure. They got that, and they got Spyro and Crash one, the Fusion or whatever it was called. But
Orange.
it's like, yeah, Spyro Orange or whatever. But it's like, okay, there's 2 GBA games which no one gives a shit about. You know what I mean? Like they're just like complete, like nothing games really. And that's it. That's it for Spyro in Japan. Like was that 6 games in total? 1, 2, Adventure, Fusion, and maybe they did Season of Ice or something like that. Maybe there's another one.
They didn't get Legend of Spyro over there, and they didn't get A Hero's Tale, thank God.
Yeah, and yeah, to be honest, even if they did get all the GBA games, that doesn't matter, because the GBA is on like a completely different scale to the PlayStation 2 in terms of like Spyro, and it's like they're not even really like, they're just these isometric. They're not really even Spyro games in like in terms of in a classical sense, So that just completely. Whereas Crash, completely different treatment. They gave him all the games. They gave him all like the localization, and the difference with the localization, right, is they made Spyro and Crash look different. They kind of gave us this Japanese flair, like on the box art and stuff like that. The difference is Crash left it at that. Now there was some secret songs you could get in like Crash 2 and 3, and like some like secret little videos and stuff like that. But gameplay wise, Crash was relatively untouched, right? Like it basically nothing really changed. There's like a few very minor little differences, but everything for the most part was untouched. Mm-hmm. But then with Spyro, the exact opposite, and you wonder which one works. Like it's like when you look back at it in hindsight, it's like, why are people even surprised it failed? Because look at how they handled it compared to Crash. You there?
That's right. They obviously had a lot more respect, or like maybe because Crash was a like more straightforward type of game, they had more faith that people would be able to pick it up and play it.
Yeah.
Whereas Spyro, I suppose at the time, like there was sort of nothing really like Spyro the Dragon.
No.
I mean, on any console, really.
And there's sort of this interesting parallel as well with Naughty Dog and Insomniac. And I think I've briefly mentioned this before, but the next series, Crash, after Crash and Spyro respectively, were Ratchet and Clank from Insomniac and Jak and Daxter from Naughty Dog.
Yep.
And you can watch which one succeeded.
Ratchet and Clank.
Yeah. So the complete tables were completely turned with the next generation, which it's not really that relevant to the point, but it's just interesting how like what is a success and what isn't in Japan. And they did similar things to Spyro in terms of and Jak, right? They like changed the way they looked, right? But they did the same thing with Ratchet, and yet for some reason it worked. And yet Naughty Dog was like a more known company over there in Japan, at the very least. Like, and Jak and Daxter sort of had this very, Crash Bandicoot vibe, whereas Ratchet and Clank was very much more American. Like if you look at like the sort of the way that it was done, like Ratchet and Clank with all the planets and stuff like that, it felt much, much more American.
It's really hard to predict what succeeds in Japan. Like I think that's something that like, we take for a given, like the games that came over here, but like it's typically like in most of the Western world, like we've got friends from the UK, from the US, and that kind of stuff, and it seems we all grew up on the same kind of stuff.
Yeah.
When you go over to Japan, you are experienced to like a whole new sort of like world in terms of like what those kids grew up with and what was out on the PlayStation 1. Like,
and just so many more games as well.
Incredible titles that we've never even like heard of over here.
Yeah. PlayStation, like PSP. Like the PSP had this entire second life over in Japan. And over here, the PSP is like a footnote compared to the DS. You know what I mean? Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Like the DS, everyone had the DS, right? No one had. I had a PSP because that was awesome, but no one really had a PSP, at least here. But in Japan, completely different story. All the cool kids had their PSP. There's like so many games, all these anime games, like all this fucking weird shit on the PSP. So the whole market is really fascinating. But
and what about the Pocket Station as well? Like they even had that over there.
Hey, actually, that also brings up this other point actually about the whole Pocket Station bonus with Spyro. With the whole Dragonfly mini games.
Oh yeah,
right? Where you can like train and like put them back in the game. You can make a different color sparks. So again, it wasn't all bad because like then you've got these people that want to put these incentives to play, and hey, that's a great idea. They
tried, right?
Yeah,
it didn't really like save it or anything, but
it's like the thing that frustrates me the most is like they did the same people that did this whole idea of adding a bonus incentive for Japanese players, so the Dragonfly thing, are the same people that okayed the changes, the camera angle changes. And again, it has to be stressed that it really is the camera angle. The whole Spyro games series comes down to a changed camera angle. Like,
it's the worst. Like I'm playing as we talk and doing this thing just for context. I'm playing Spyro 2 Japanese.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
And the Japanese version. Oh.
Yeah, the Japanese version. Yeah.
And like you can, at least in Spyro 2 you can switch it off. I'm not too sure about Spyro 1 if you can or not.
No, the 120% reward. Here's a great little piece of fucking knowledge, right? Here's your reward for 120%ing it. You get the director's cut. Where you get to play in the normal way. Oh, except you still charge as slow as shit. So
well, I mean that's the same in Spyro 2. You still charge slow as shit, but at least you can change the camera angle from the start of the game, even though it's hidden in menus and you got to find out how to first.
Yeah.
The funny thing is, it's not the passive camera angle. Like people often confuse it for the passive camera angle. It's not the same as the passive camera angle from the English version of the game, or the Western version.
Yeah.
It's and I know we harp on about this thing, but it's a game breaker. This thing, it's like if you had no option to play it, you wouldn't play it. You like it's quite frankly, it makes the game almost unplayable. And I think it was a little too late by the time Spyro 2 came around in Japan that you could change it because do you have the sales figures for that? I can tell you it didn't do very well, and that's why they never brought Spyro 3 over there.
Spyro 2.
Spyro 2 Japanese. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it didn't do all too well. And and you can, on one hand you can understand why they didn't bring 3. You can understand it, but it still doesn't make it not frustrating that they never got to see a third one. Because could you imagine, right, in a theoretical world that they make a Spyro 3 Japanese and they fix it, right? They play it, they release it in the exact same way as the original, right? And even if it sold shit, at least the legacy of Spyro in Japan would be like, well, the first 2 ones had this weird thing, but then they, in number three could have been this like cult classic, where it could have that second life, on the age of the internet, right? Where it's like the Japanese version like has that sort of notoriety for being like this, but then in the third one they fixed it, I really do wish for that reality. Because it's like,
unfortunately, we're living in the darkest timeline.
Because it's like this is like more. It's like, well, why should you really care? But I do have this kind of feeling where it's like I'm really disappointed, not just because it failed, but because like probably thousands of Japanese kids' impressions of Spyro is like, oh, Baka, that's shit. Fucking weird, stupid camera. He's a slow dragon. Why would I want to play this piece of crap? And that bothers me. It bothers me way more than I'd like to admit. Like, it just bothers me that the game came out in this way, and the impression, like, I'm pretty sure it didn't review too well, and it's like, this is Sony. It wasn't like some executive. It wasn't like we can hate. It's like an Activision thing where it's like they, with the latest Spyro games, we have like the guy, the whole vicarious, not vicarious visions, Activision / Universal rushing the game and stuff like that. So there's your excuse.
Well, it wasn't rushed either. It was like brought out a year, 6 months.
No, that's what I'm saying. Like, it wasn't like that situation with the latest Spyro games. It was within their own fucking damn company that they internally fucked it up. Within Sony, who had such a great track record. You had stuff like Crash, and you had Metal Gear Solid, and like in Japan, in America at least, Spyro was one of those marquee series. And they completely, fucked it up. So
remember it fondly to this day. Like most contemporaries, like if you talk to someone who's your age who had the PlayStation, chances are Spyro was one of their games that they played in their childhood. And it's a shame that Japan never really experienced that. Like, I think the interesting thing for Japan is, and if any of you have ever been there, you'll know that like for one country they have a very, very, very sort of specific culture and sort of very specific Japanese exclusive. Everything over there is Japanese exclusive. Basically, like if you grew up in Japan, like you would be privy to a very, 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 very different sort of upbringing. I mean, that's pretty much stating the obvious, but like just taste in video games, taste in film, taste in everything. Like films over there come out like 6 months after they come out here, like commercial films. Like we were over there, and La La Land, for instance, that was getting a March release in Japan, right?
Yeah.
like over here, like Oscars, the Oscar season and everything, like that's February. So it's specifically released because of that. But they don't give a shit about the Oscars over in Japan.
No, they don't. And I mean, games especially. You've got the series I've been playing a shitload lately, the Yakuza series. Like that game could only ever be produced by a Japanese development team. It's that game is like a complete. Like I highly recommend everyone play it because you'll see just how Japanese it is. Like a game like that would never ever be produced by an American team unless they were going for full on self-aware parody, like where they 100 and they have like these guys on the team like consulting. So that kind of thing, like the Japanese definitely very, very peculiar with their taste and stuff like that. Obviously there are exceptions, of course, and but it is really fascinating to see just all elements of their of their culture and stuff like that. I know we're getting off in a bit of a tangent, but yeah.
Well, no, I think it's relevant too because
I think it's relevant. Yeah.
Spyro was made with, Western audiences in mind. Like,
Mm-hmm.
like that's a given. We know that it's
like
made
by
it's like, Americans for Westerners or by Westerners for Westerners, right?
Yeah, and that is true. So yeah, it's like there is this element of like, was it aimed at them type thing? But then you could say the same thing about Crash, and what they did was the gameplay remained the same, but the marketing was different. And
look, here's the thing I think, and it's something that I don't think I hear being brought up too often in regards to this. It's like when we see something from Japan, right, brought over here, right? Let's look at that pen, pineapple, apple pen thing, for instance.
oh yeah, that was everywhere.
That was everywhere, right? We think, what the fuck is this shit? We have no idea what this is. It's weird and it's Japanese and it's a bit foreign and alienating to us, right? It works both ways, people. The whole, but maybe a little less because most of the world like has become this sort of homogenized, Americanized, westernized sort of mess. But in Japan, they cling to their traditions and their own sort of IPs. So it does work both ways. Like they would definitely like see something like Spyro and maybe not be accustomed to it as much as we are. But I don't know. Maybe that's something to do, something to think about there.
Another quick thing to add. This is just two things I wanted to add as well about the gameplay. I just realized this just then, and I completely forgot about that. I have to mention is we have two more gameplay differences. One, the swimming, the one fucking mechanic, which is like if you know me, I constantly laud the Spyro 2 swimming mechanics as being the best swimming mechanics in video game history. I stick by that. Oh, they managed to fuck that up. They managed to fuck that up too in Japanese version. You can't charge under the water for more than a second. You do one burst and then you stop. Then you have to start again. So they can't even let you get momentum under the fucking water. How atrocious is that? I mean, that's another thing. What developer? I mean, what company thought, gee, here, this swimming is really fun. Why don't I make it really tedious and slow for you? Like, who thinks of that? What idiot thinks of that? And one more thing, real quick, sparks. Another confusing element. He's one color, right? And then he just gets less illuminated every time. Gee, well, that's a great confusing way to show how much health you have left. Yeah. So that's also another alienating technique.
How about the weird thing that they took out all the buttons in the homeworld, in the first homeworld? Those button things where you got to flame the buttons to get through the doorways,
Oh, yeah.
Why did they take those out? I mean, there's strange differences.
It's almost as if the Sony Entertainment Japan thought that their audience were a bunch of idiots and didn't know how to operate anything. And it's it's like an indictment on their own culture. It's almost like racist to themselves. We're so stupid, we don't even know what this button does.
We could give them a charge underwater, but I think the kids would be a little too dangerous with that, and it might cause them to run into an enemy. So
it's as if the fucking Parents Television Council just took the game and decided to censor everything. Right to censor came in and just thought, let's just purposely make this worse.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't get. I would genuinely like someone from the development team or the Japanese localization team to tell me why they changed some stuff like that, because it's just baffling to me. Some of these things I can say, okay, sure, I just don't get it because I'm an Australian and this is the Japanese localization, and sure maybe this makes sense to them, but there's some other stuff that I just can't make head nor tail of. And video games, as far as I'm aware, do not do this kind of stuff anymore. It's usually one sort of release, but you change the language, and people are fine with that.
Yeah, or you have bonus content. It's the Japanese version, you get this difference here. You get this free thing, or some bonus thing. Yeah. It's usually never it has actually happened before. Actually, bringing up Yakuza 3 was very famous for removing. So this is where I say that it goes both ways, right? Yakuza is this super Japanese series, and in 3 they removed all of these extra content, all of this side mission content, because they thought that Western audiences wouldn't understand. It's sort of perverted mini games and stuff like that. basically they took it out. So it does work both ways. Like, it's not just like oh lol, Japan is so stupid. It is the same thing with American, but for the most part, they have tried to remove that sort of thing from gaming, because there was a huge backlash from fans when they cut out like about 30 related like mini games and stuff like that. So yeah, hopefully let's just never do that again, okay? Can we just agree to just never cut content from different localized versions?
Yeah, I mean, we're living in 2017 now. Like,
God's sake,
surely people can handle like, a good camera system, fast moving gameplay, and that kind of stuff. People can handle that by now, can't they? Can't they handle that?
Now we're just getting like real petty and like all bitter, just like you just like completely. That's what it's like though. Like when you start the video, you're like, oh okay, and then the more you talk about it, like it's one of those things where I've been talking on and off about Spyro Japanese for like 5 years. Every single time I start talking about it, I get annoyed again. Like I like get over it. I'm like, yeah, whatever, it's okay. And then I keep talking about it. I'm like, you know what? No, fuck this. Like, this is just so dumb.
The funny thing is about it, right? It's like, some stuff. It's like, hey, let's have a fun game of pick the differences between the Japanese and the, American version. Yeah. And then it's like you could do that only so many times before you say, why the fuck did they change this stuff? Yeah. The Japanese version's shit. I think those kind of comparison games only work when the thing you're comparing it that you're familiar with is not as good as the thing that you're.
Yeah, that's
the other thing.
That's right. Yeah, because we used to be like back in the day. Like if you're an early follower of us or whatever, you should see there was like this back in 2010, 2011, maybe in 2012. There was this whole fascination with the Japanese version, and a lot of like a Japanese version of other games, and a lot of the time. Like with certain games, it's fine. You know what I mean? Like for example, the different TNT crates in Crash, like that's fine. Like that's cool. It's a cool difference.
It's
right?
cool. Yeah, we like that.
It's no issue. But then you get to the differences in this, like with the camera angle, where it's like it's not bonus content. It's not a difference that has any actual like merit. It's basically essentially cutting out content from the game and purposely making it worse. That's not a difference. That's just being a complete idiot. When it comes to developing. So. Yeah, I mean, it like look when you look at a lot of the like artwork and stuff like that. Like we back when we were in Japan, we were like giddy schoolgirls like over like the Crash Bandicoot and Spyro and shit. Look at the fucking differences and stuff like that, because they were good differences. Like it was like a universalized Crash Bandicoot.
They put craft into their like cover art and box art and that kind of stuff.
Oh my god, it's amazing.
But that's because that's the stuff that they have control over, obviously. When you look at the Spyro cover, right, and you see this cartoony, like, anime-looking Spyro, then you play the game and it's like, looks nothing like that. Maybe people were a little let down by the fact that, like, they weren't promised this sort of, like, cartoony, cel-shaded, like, fun, lighthearted adventure.
That actually, that could be part of it. I think,
as weird as it sounds, maybe Spyro was too dark for these people because.
We've actually we've talked about this. I remember, like, this is a real old memory, but back when Ratchet 5 did a Let's Play of Spyro Japanese, I remember going on this big rant. This was like, to put it this way, it was in 2011. I went on this big rant about how there's like no middle ground in gaming anymore. And like things like Spyro is like the perfect example of like middle ground gaming, where it's like not quite adult, but it's not quite like for just babies, like only babies can play. And it's like, that is something that is very much relevant even in today's gaming climate. Like that whole problem, which I believe started in the 90s, right? And more specifically the early 2000s with the rise of GTA and all those sort of open world sort of shooting sort of games. That really did effectively like basically shoehorn the market into two separate demographics: little children and fucking grown adults that love gore and like just want to blow people's heads off and shit.
That's spot on. And you know what? Like, as much as people love the video games of today, like I used to consider myself to be like a gamer of sorts. Like I would buy, like, the consoles like as they came out, and I guess I have not bought a video game since, and it's a weird one, SimCity 5 in 2013.
I remember when you got that, and before that it had been a while too.
Before that, I probably Skyward Sword,
Yeah. Oh yeah, that one.
something like that.
See, yeah. So I've definitely been. I would consider I've been more of a gamer than Angus in this, like in the last probably 5 years or so. But a lot
Video
of
games
that.
they just depress me now. It's like
It's like that's why I love stuff like Yakuza and like Kingdom Hearts. And ironically enough, Japanese games they still kind of I still like them because one, they still do video game music, and this is sort of another point entirely, but they still do video game music, and there's this is more of like that middle ground thing, but. Yeah, I know what you're saying.
I have to play a fucking murderous guy who like runs around just killing people needlessly, and it's like, but it's an expansive open world game. How many games can be like expansive open world with fascinating side characters and interesting plot lines and enthralling gameplay where I have to spend 200 hours playing the game? Why can't I play as a purple dragon going around collecting gems in a lighthearted, fun platform? What happened to those days?
I love it how you just described Yakuza. Yet I fucking adore that game, but it's like I still know what you're saying though. It's like this overabundance of it. And
why do I have to sign up to like a correspondence course type situation to play one video game, right? It's like I gotta dedicate like all my free time after work or whatever to playing this game, like because I gotta discover every single intricate like detail about it. I gotta talk to the character and find out that his daughter was killed and that's why he does what he does, and that kind of stuff. It's like
it's almost a different it's a different style.
I don't give a
game.
shit if I want to watch a movie that like I'll watch the movie. If I want to play a video game, I just maybe it's like I'm one of those guys. It's like oh, you just like the mind numbing like just will play a video game for the fact that you're just doing something, just kill time or something. You don't want to have an experience and meet profound characters. It's like I don't give a shit sometimes about profound characters. I could play like Fallout and Skyrim and Overwatch and all these games and be amazed by the writing and the characters, and I don't care. I'm basically wasting hours of my time doing the same shit. I want a game that's fun, I can play, doesn't take too long, and kills a few hours, right? I don't want to dedicate my entire 6 months to a year to play one game. It's just
I think there should be a choice. I think if you want to do that, that's great because there are some really good games in that style. But then there also should be more games like Spyro, like the Crashes, your platformers, which were the prototypical example of just kill some time, have some fun, and meet some cool characters while you're at it. Have a cool story.
Every game needs to sell you on their amazing DLC and toys that come with the game. Video games can't just be video games anymore. They have to be experiences. Did you miss this point?
It's like if they've tried too hard to Hollywoodize, I guess. And look, again, I emphasize that I don't have a problem with with some games being like that. But it's when almost every single game is like that. That's when it gets frustrating. Thankfully, as much as we just spent time basically shitting on Japanese development, or at least Sony, Japan, there are a lot of games like that can be described as more lighthearted and fun. Look at some of the games we picked up while we were over in Japan. But again, emphasis a lot of them were old games, PlayStation 1 games, stuff like that, PS2. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I guess times have changed.
See, the alternative now, if you want something to something fun and lighthearted, you're looking at some kind of mobile app game. That's the alternative. The alternative is either spend your entire life playing or spend hours or years or whatever playing one game, or on the train or the bus play about half an hour or something playing a few games of
some tapping game. I think that's probably another topic entirely. I think we could probably go off on that one actually. That's something. This
makes me mad.
That's definitely relevant. I think we could probably even do a whole topic on that sort of the mobile app uprising basically. And look, again, good and bad aspects to that because people getting paid, people making stuff. That's cool. But at what cost? I'm almost thinking of the title right here. At what cost did mobile game development do to games, like more lighthearted games, like simple games on consoles.
Oh yeah, because I mean, you talk about the light and the dark type of games. You got either kiddie games or you got games
Super
for
adult,
adults,
yeah.
right? Now you've also got games that you dedicate a lot of time to, or games that are like arcade type games that you play for fun for like a little bit on your phone or on the tablet or whatever. Like that's the camps now. Sure, you got all these like indie games that have come up like that you can play on Steam, but like, oh, that's another discussion point entirely. But like, it's just maybe I'm this old man shaking my cane at the.
There's an element of that. There's a slight element of that. But you're self-aware enough to admit that. So
yeah, I can admit that. I can admit. Sure, I'm saying, back in my day, video games.
And you're not as negative as Ratchet 5, who gets a lot of hate on this channel actually for being like overly cynical. I think you've got a pretty healthy amount of cynicism. I mean, I don't entirely agree with all of the modern game stuff. Like, I do think that there's some merit to it, but I think a lot of that is because you just haven't played as much of that stuff, and you'd be the first to admit that you aren't really a modern gamer. So it is a bit different. It is a bit of a different perspective, I think, as well, from you.
Yeah. But what else? Like, I suppose we've sort of we've wrapped up this discussion of Spyro in Japan, right?
Yeah, I think that as we always do, we end up going on tangents and shit.
Oh,
but
look, I could probably spend the rest of I could spend all day talking about like video games and
it's like
whatever.
and what was I going to say? I was going to say that the funny thing is, to sort of say this, is that we actually had another entire 1 hour podcast recorded, but it turns out I fucked up and somehow didn't record my own voice. So
it's just me and Andrew.
We had this it's like me, you, and Ratchet talking for like an hour about like Spyro and stuff like that. But hopefully now we've probably forgotten what we said back then, so there will be some more Spyro related topics. But we'd also, if you are still listening, definitely leave some suggestions in the comment section what you would like to see us talk about, because me, like myself, Ratchet, Angus, Johnny Natrium, Al, whoever, we're pretty much happy to talk about anything. We don't have to just talk about Spyro. We're definitely excited. We definitely want to just do more talking related content, discussion related content, because I think it's quite an interesting avenue, and you can definitely involve you guys in the discussion as well. Like,
for sure,
potentially,
for sure. Like,
I would
leave
like
us some comments and some questions, and like we'll definitely address them. Like,
I definitely
as you can
think
tell,
we should
we
do
can
that.
go off on any tangent and talk about almost anything. Like, we've got like just, I don't know, years of just chatting about this kind of stuff off camera.
Yeah.
This is basically great. When you and I are together or whatever, like this is the kind of shit we talk about anyway.
I know. Me and Ratchet, whenever we meet up, because Ratchet now lives in Adelaide, whenever we met up, we end up inevitably talking about something like this, and like we are completely aware that we've talked about it before. We just do it anyway because it's just fun.
And professional wrestling. If you've got questions about professional,
oh god, just ask Liam and Ellen how much we talk about wrestling when it's just us around.
We just can't help it.
Yeah,
it's like with any friend. You basically meet each other through some channel and then exclusively talk about that channel until you die. Like that's it.
Yeah, and you can expand to other things like we obviously have, but there will always be that Spyro discussion just waiting to happen. We'll
talk about Spyro when we're in our 80s.
Yeah, I think we will. I would love to see the future when we are just talking about Spyro when we're 80 years old. It's like, the Spyro. It's like the Spyro PS21 remake was fucking shit. It's like, but the Spyro PS19 remake, they were the old days. That was good.
Oh god, I was around when the PlayStation 17 was in its infancy. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I just had my third grandchild.
You gave birth to your third grandchild.
All right. This is time it's time to end it before we get too weird.
Okay, fantastic. All right, well, hopefully you stuck around to the end. CrystalFissure's retention will show that you did. Hopefully.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Look, just to name and shame, in next edition of this podcast or whatever it is, we will tell you the retention rate, and we want to beat it. We don't care about wanting to get 100 likes on the video. We want to beat the retention rate. So
we'll take that too, though. Give us. Let's aim for 200 likes. All right.
They really help us out, guys. So could you please chuck us a like?
One like equals $100. So please, guys. Okay.
Yeah, that's right. And subscribe to Nintendogen64. Subscribe
One
to
sub to
Crystal-
Nintendo Gen 64, I'll give him $100 as well. So
If I
can we get 10,000 subs?
If I get 10,000 subscribers in a week, I will do videos again. So lofty, I know, but basically, if everyone who watched this video could subscribe to me, that'd be great. And
you'd be 1/10 of the way there. So
it really helps me out. And yeah, so we look forward to your correspondence, and we'll be in touch in the future with a further episode of More Talk, Let's Play. I think
Good stuff. I think that is the name. Yeah. All right, guys. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you later.
Take care. Spike your hair.